Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to show you how not to decorate a cake. So you loved my video on how not to pipe, so I thought I'd do the same concept when it comes to decorating a cake. Now you can see that I'm starting with a crumb-coated cake because I think most people struggle with the second layer of buttercream. So in this video, I'm going to show you everything not to do, if that makes sense, when it comes to that second coat of buttercream. So like I said, I'm going to start off with a crumb-coated cake, and I've got my 6-inch crumb-coated cake here. Now the reason why I want to start off from the crumb-coated stage is because the reality is that the crumb coat does not have to be perfect. The idea is that the crumb coat is a thin layer that secures the crumbs. So even if it's slightly wonky or not as straight as mine is, you can correct it with the outside coating, which of course is the most important bit. So firstly, something that I've picked up, especially over the years of teaching lots of people, is the way to apply the buttercream to your cake. So I've got some Swiss meringue buttercream in a bowl, and I used to do it this way. I used to grab my palette knife, take some buttercream, and place it on the cake, like so. And start applying the buttercream around the cake with the palette knife. Now, this does work, and if you're an inexperienced cake decorator, you may find this method quicker. However, what can easily happen is that naturally you start putting less on the top and you get a really thin layer. When it comes to scraping, it's not even. So, rule number 1, use a piping bag to apply that second coating just like this. So I'm filling the piping bag with my buttercream. Cut a small hole in the end and pipe the buttercream directly on the cake, like so, all the way round. And this way you can ensure the same amount of buttercream goes onto the cake all the way up the cake. So my second point is not to start with your side scraper until you've worked with your palette knife, starting with the top. Now, let's talk about the top for a second. The top you want nice and flat, especially if you're doing tiered cakes, because another cake's gonna go on top. So what I start to do is gently move the buttercream around the top of the cake and then position the palette knife at an angle and rotate. Now, what you don't want to do is the following. Apply loads of pressure so all this buttercream comes off. No, you're not taking off the buttercream at this point, you're simply smoothing it out. So, I'm going to put that back on, spread it out, and gently place the palette knife. And notice how I'm at an angle with the palette knife to the cake. Not flat, because otherwise this happens. You want to spread out the buttercream. And you're basically letting the palette knife do the work. And what you can also see happening is as I'm going round the top, the buttercream is getting pushed out over the edges. Another reason to start with your palette knife and not with your side scraper. Because if you go on just with your side scraper and there's no buttercream over the edge, I'll just do this area here, it's not catching on to that corner and you're not going to get those full corners that we want. So it's important to start with your palette knife first. Now I want to go around the sides of the cake because, like I said, you piped on that buttercream, there may be gaps and you're going to put air bubbles in. So what I don't want to ever see is someone doing this. No, no, no. It's a big no. There is one way to put your palette knife on a cake. It's not like this, because you can't get there because of the handle. It's not like this, because the palette knife isn't straight against the cake. And of course, you're not using the tip either to spread. That's why we have the cake stand, which is the over, and therefore the palette knife is flat against the cake. And it remains completely vertical. And now I can work the cake side to side. This is the only way to put the palette knife against the side of the cake. I can't stress that enough. Once you've got this in place, you can move up and down the cake, smoothing out the buttercream. Now it's time for the scraper. And you can also see that as I was going around with the palette knife, the corners of buttercream started to come up, and that wouldn't have happened if I went on with the scraper first. Now, I'm gonna mess this cake up completely just to show you what happens if you use the scraper wrong, okay? Firstly, I like calling it a smoother because you don't scrape off buttercream, you smooth it out. What a lot of people do is firstly hold the scraper up at the top, which means you push in the top of the cake and go really hard around the cake. And what happens? You take all this buttercream off and start seeing the cake inside, and all your buttercreams come off. That's not what we're doing here. We want to smooth out this buttercream. So let me just apply more buttercream. Let's try that again, shall we? So firstly, I'm not holding the scraper at the top, I'm holding it at the bottom, okay? When you're holding it at the bottom, the remaining of the scraper is straight. Now, rather than scraping off that buttercream, I'm going on with a very light pressure and smoothing it out. So gentle pressure this time, and turning the turntable. And only after a few turns, this is the only amount of buttercream I've taken off. So remember the mound from before? It's nowhere near as much. So you keep going, and you can see the buttercream smoothing out. And another big part of it is the angle of the scraper. So once again, if the angle is more perpendicular, you're more likely to scrape off the buttercream. We don't want to do that. Let me put it back on. So it's like a 45-degree angle towards the cake, smoothing out the buttercream. Much better, right? So let's take off this excess, and I'm going to show you how not to use your turntable. Now, some people are quite scared of this turntable, and so they're a bit hesitant to turn it with confidence. But what happens? We get these lines. Now, we don't want those lines, so we're going to be a little bit more confident with the turntable. Your scraper's in the right position, and you're going to turn, almost throw the cake around. Obviously helps having a good quality turntable. If that is too scary, I'll show you another way. So rather than short turns like this, you can put your scraper on the side, and with your other hand, come all the way round in one go with the turntable and off. I'll show you again. So for me, it's my left hand that goes to the back of the turntable. My right hand is holding the scraper, and I'm coming all the way around in one go until I can't cross my hands anymore, and off. And that is also how you can achieve a really smooth effect, especially when you get towards the end. Now, I don't have any gaps in this buttercream, but if you did, you can always add on more buttercream. So people would take some buttercream on their palette knife and do this. Like I said before, you don't ever want to put your palette knife in this position. You've now dented the cake and ruined the shape of the outside. So if you're going to put on more buttercream to hide something, you have to go back to the over action and place it on like this. And then you can go over with your scraper, however you like, whether it's the fast turns or the slow one. Another common mistake is you've done this beautiful movement, you stop and then off, and you can't figure out why. There's a big line there. So when you stop and then take the scraper off, it forms a line. Same as if you were to put it on, you form a line like so. So to avoid that, you want to come onto the cake already slightly moving, turn however much you need, and then when you're ready to come off, glide off, like so. And that avoids that one line when you're coming off the cake. And this is how I usually finish off this outer coating. So I'll do it a few times. Come on, already turning, very gently with the scraper. And then off again. And the more you do it, the smoother the buttercream will be, and hopefully those small air bubbles will also go. However, of course there's a however, if you're working at your cake for too long, what can happen is the buttercream can start to solidify, especially if you've had your crumb coat in the freezer. So just bear that in mind, kind of know when to stop. Now, don't get me wrong, this takes practice. You're not gonna get it on your first turn. I've been doing this for about 10 years. So you have to remember that. But with these tricks, it will just help you that little bit more. So you've done the outside coating, you're happy with the smoothness, and now you want to tackle the top corners. Now, if you wanted to, you can place this in the freezer and cut off the corners like I show in my other videos. But if you want to take them off when the buttercream is soft, what you don't do is two of the following things. Firstly, come on like I do and continue to the other side. Because look what's happened. You've knocked that buttercream over the edge, and so you need to go back on with your scraper to catch that bit of buttercream, because you don't want it going over the edge anymore. What you want to do is bring it into the center and take it off when you reach the center like that. Clean your palette knife, because if you don't, a little bit of buttercream will appear back on the side and you need to go around with your scraper. So can you see that every time it affects the top corners, you'll need to correct it again with your scraper. And every time you go around the outside with your scraper, you're at risk of ruining the cake again. So you want to really make sure this palette knife is clean before each swipe across that surface. So bring it inwards each time. Now, believe it or not, and I see this time and time again in my classes, is the student gets to this and then they do this. Let's go on the top again because I want it flat. And maybe let's kind of fill the corners and do a bit of this. No, please don't. The last thing you do when you're decorating a cake is that inward motion. The second you start touching the top again, look what happens. The buttercream comes out the sides again. So you have to go around with your side scraper and kind of start the process, not all over again, but you need to go around it. And again, you're at risk of it getting ruined. So the last point, which is probably the most important point, is the order in which you do things. You start on the top after having piped your buttercream on, then you work on your sides, and then the last thing is bringing these top corners in. So that is how you decorate a cake, and I've also shown you how not to decorate it. So hopefully a lot of you have found this tutorial helpful. I know certain people struggle with certain parts of it, so I hope I've cleared up as to where you may be going wrong. If you do have any suggestions of other tutorials that you want to see, then write in the description box below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and check out all my other recipes and tutorials. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you very soon.